I'm not expecting you to say anything, but do you think there's a chance Ilia Topuria could end up on that card? Big star.
It's a possibility.
Dana White confirmed that matchmaking for the UFC's most historic card has officially begun, and when Ilia Topuria's name came up as a potential fighter, White didn't shoot it down. He called it a possibility. Now, with Topuria's legal troubles completely resolved, that possibility has transformed into what looks like a virtual certainty. The case has been closed, with Topuria emerging completely victorious. On February 5, 2026, the entire lightweight division witnessed a seismic shift because the primary obstacle keeping Ilia Topuria sidelined has been permanently eliminated. The prolonged legal dispute between him and his former wife, Georgina Uzcategui, has been settled, dismissed, and concluded, and the manner of its resolution is genuinely remarkable. Rather than deteriorating into an extended, messy courtroom war that could have dragged on for months while the division remained in limbo, everything wrapped up quickly, cleanly, and completely on the champion's terms. Marca initially reported through journalist Arati Pratt that Topuria and Uzcategui had reached an agreement, resulting in the complete dismissal of the case. This encompassed everything: the divorce proceedings, custody arrangements for their daughter, and all the financial disagreements that had been accumulating for months. The most significant aspect is that the agreement was reached using the terms Topuria had originally proposed. This means Uzcategui withdrew her lawsuit and accepted what he had offered from the very start. He maintained his position without compromising or renegotiating from a weakened stance. The conditions he initially presented became the final signed term. Multiple news sources described it as an amicable resolution, essentially indicating both parties reached a handshake agreement and moved forward without additional complications. The magnitude of this development for the sport extends far beyond Topuria's personal situation. This wasn't some minor legal inconvenience that an elite fighter could simply ignore while continuing training as usual. This represented a comprehensive legal matter that had completely sidelined the undisputed UFC lightweight champion for what was becoming the longest period of inactivity in his career. We're discussing well over 11 months away from competition, 11 months without defending the championship he claimed through dominant performance. For someone like Topuria, who built his reputation on consistent activity, moving between weight classes and challenging the toughest available opponents, never avoiding fights and constantly seeking new challenges, being forced into this extended hiatus must have been incredibly frustrating. This competitor transitioned from featherweight champion to lightweight champion seamlessly, yet suddenly found himself unable to compete due to circumstances completely outside the octagon. The situation reportedly began in 2025 when Topuria and Uzcategui separated, but escalated into something much more complex than anyone anticipated. Custody battles, financial disagreements, back-and-forth accusations, the type of issues that consume not just your schedule but your entire mental focus. The situation became so complicated that MMA media was spreading rumors about him potentially selling his Madrid mansion for approximately $3.5 million, because the divorce was allegedly depleting his finances and forcing asset liquidation to manage expenses. People were creating narratives about a champion falling apart privately, losing his wealth, his home, and his grip on the career he'd spent years building. It turns out every single one of those rumors was completely fabricated. Topuria isn't selling anything and isn't going anywhere. The house remains his, the gym inside remains his, and he's already utilizing both to prepare for what comes next. TMZ Sports confirmed the settlement and reported Topuria's imminent return to competition. Yahoo Sports went further, describing it as a complete victory for the champion. When you examine how everything unfolded, that's precisely the accurate description. He achieved the settlement he wanted on his preferred terms without any of the worst-case scenarios people had been speculating about for months, and he didn't waste even a moment celebrating his legal victory. Within hours of the news breaking across major outlets, Topuria posted training footage on Instagram from his gym with a 3-word caption that sent shockwaves throughout the MMA world. The champ is... The video showcased his workout at his private home facility in Madrid, and this isn't some basic garage setup with a heavy bag and pull-up bar. This represents a legitimate world-class training facility constructed within his residence. Recovery tanks, hyperbaric chambers, premium training equipment, everything necessary to conduct a complete professional fight camp without leaving his property. That's exactly his current approach. No delays, no adjustment period, no gradual reintegration. The legal matters concluded and training commenced the same day. That demonstrates the mindset of a champion who's been anticipating this moment for nearly a year. Essentially, sports media covered the court's decision and immediately connected it to the implications for the lightweight division and the UFC overall. The undisputed champion is free, no more court appearances diverting his training focus, no more lawyers consuming his schedule, no more sideline uncertainty about when or if he'd return to competition. The entire division had been frozen because the top fighter couldn't compete, and now that obstacle has been completely removed. The settlement didn't merely end a difficult personal chapter for Topuria, it essentially fired the starting gun on the biggest comeback the UFC has witnessed in years. He's not targeting just any fight or any card, he has one specific date marked on his calendar, attached to the most ambitious event the UFC has ever attempted in its entire history.
So yesterday, my team, they put together, we come up with a whole plan for production, how it's going to work. My head of production, Craig Borsari, has been working with the White House, for a couple months now, and they build this video rendering of like every tree that's on the property and all this stuff. It's exactly the way it is. We can literally the sun, how the sun will hit the seats at certain times, what it'll look like when it's dark. This is going to be so badass.
The event Topuria is targeting isn't simply another UFC card or regular numbered pay-per-view squeezed between fight nights on a random Saturday. This represents something on a completely different scale from anything ever attempted in mixed martial arts. And that's not hyperbole. The UFC White House card is scheduled for June 14, 2026, on the south lawn of the actual White House in Washington, D.C. Consider that for a moment. A professional MMA event on the White House lawn, with competitors fighting in the octagon using the most famous building in America as their backdrop. This has literally never occurred in American sports history, not for boxing, wrestling, or any sport ever. Dana White is attempting to make this card the most loaded, stacked, championship-heavy fight night anyone has ever witnessed. The concept originated from President Trump, who proposed it publicly during a July 20. He wanted something significant, patriotic, something matching the scale of the moment. The moment is genuinely massive. June 14th is Flag Day, aligning perfectly with Trump's 81st birthday, and the entire event celebrates America's semi-quincentennial, marking the country's 200. They initially discussed July 4th to emphasize the patriotic angle, but June 14th became the final date, and the UFC has been investing everything into making it happen since the announcement. Dana White discussed the insane production requirements when he appeared on Pat McAfee's show, explaining how his team has been working directly with the White House for months, ensuring every detail is perfect. They're literally mapping sun exposure for every seat at every hour, and have rendered every tree on the property. That's the level of precision involved.
And it's a one of one in our lifetime to be able to do something like that. And Pat, absolutely brilliant as usual by you to take your shot that night in the box. And for you and your team to come be a part of this, it's going to be something that you will never forget for the rest of your life.
White describes this event as a one of one, not one of the best, but the only one, and examining the actual logistics of their construction reveals why he feels that way. The South Lawn will accommodate approximately 5,000 to 6,000 seats, all invitation only, creating an extremely exclusive guest list that will likely read like a who's who of politics, entertainment, and sports, but it extends beyond that. They're planning 8 to 10 giant outdoor screens in surrounding areas, so somewhere between 85,000 and 100,000 fans in nearby locations, like the Ellipse and around the National Mall, can watch everything live. Consider that visual, nearly 100,000 people gathered around the White House watching UFC fights on a Saturday night. The walkouts will be absolutely legendary, because fighters will reportedly walk from the Oval Office to the octagon. Imagine that scene, a UFC champion walking through White House halls, stepping onto the South Lawn, and approaching the cage with the entire world watching. They're also discussing weigh-ins at the Lincoln Memorial, fireworks over the DC skyline after fights, and potentially a full week-long UFC takeover of the city with fan events, open workouts, and promotional activities at major landmarks. It's not just a fight card, but a complete spectacle. Everything streams on Paramount+, the UFC's new broadcasting home, after leaving ESPN, with some preliminary fights also airing on regular CBS television for maximum viewership. The pay-per-view model is officially dead for UFC, and White explained why this benefits fans during his McAfee appearance. Instead of spending $70 or $80 for every major card, you get everything for an annual subscription price, which is a game changer for casual fans who might have been priced out previously. Regarding the actual card, Trump has suggested it could feature 8 or 9 title fights, an absolutely absurd number. The most stacked UFC cards in history typically have 2 or 3 title fights maximum. If they achieve 9, this won't just be the biggest UFC event ever, it'll be the biggest combat sports event of all time by a significant margin. White's been calling it the baddest card of all time, and based on everything we're hearing, he's completely serious about making that happen. For anyone concerned about optics, the UFC is funding everything personally. No taxpayer money. White has made this clear repeatedly so nobody can complain about it. When McAfee asked directly about fight arrangements for the card, White was completely honest about his process, and that Monday has come and gone. The matchmaking machine is officially running at full speed, and the name at the very top of everyone's list, fighters, media, insiders, fans debating dream cards on social media, is the guy who just settled his legal case and is already back training in his Madrid gym, Ilia Topuria. There's one specific opponent everyone on the planet is pointing to as the guy who should stand across from him on June 14th, which brings us to the fight itself and why it might be the biggest main event the UFC has ever booked.
Do you have anything special planned for that? When do you start putting that?
We literally today. Matchmaking was today, and we started working on the first Paramount card today.
I'm not expecting you to say anything, but do you think there's a chance Ilia Topuria could end up on that card? Big star.
It's a possibility.
Remember what Dana White said when asked directly about Topuria being on a major card? A possibility, he said. But honestly, with the case dismissed, the champ back in the gym looking sharp, the interim champ demanding war every chance he gets, and the most historic venue in UFC history, locked and loaded for June 14th, this stopped being just a possibility long ago. This is happening, and the entire world will be watching when it does. Thanks for watching, and check out other content on the screen. If the White House card represents the biggest stage the UFC has ever constructed, then the fight everyone wants to see headline it is pretty obvious at this point. Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje for the undisputed lightweight championship. While we're technically still in the rumors and speculation phase, calling it speculation almost feels inappropriate anymore. The evidence pointing toward this fight actually happening is so overwhelming, coming from so many directions, both fighters, multiple insiders, media reports, betting markets, that it feels like we're all waiting for Dana White to make it official. Everyone already knows it's coming. Let's examine what each fighter brings to the table, starting with Topuria. This fighter is 17-0, never been beaten in his entire professional career. He won the vacant lightweight title by knocking out Charles Oliveira at UFC 317 in June 2025, and that performance was so impressive, so clean, so completely dominant that Dana White literally compared him to Muhammad Ali afterward. White called it some Ali-level stuff, and said he did exactly what he promised, calling him a star. Consider that for a moment. The UFC president, someone who has watched thousands of fights and worked with every big name from Conor McGregor to John Jones, is invoking Muhammad Ali's name to describe this 20-something-year-old from Spain. That's not casual praise. That tells you exactly where Topuria sits in the sport right now. He's been out for over 11 months, the longest layoff of his championship career, but the legal mess is behind him. Gym footage is already circulating, and the target is crystal clear. On the other side, Justin Gaethje captured the interim lightweight belt at UFC 324 on January 24, 2026, beating Paddy Pimblett by unanimous decision, marking the second time in his career he's held an interim title. If you've been paying attention to Gaethje's statements over recent months, you know exactly what he wants. He hasn't been subtle, coy, or playing the "I'll fight whoever Dana puts in front of me" game. He's been on every show, every podcast, every post-fight interview, saying the exact same thing: the only fight that makes sense is Topuria, and the only place it should happen is the White House. On the Pat McAfee show, Gaethje laid it all out without hesitation, saying this fight will main event the White House card, period. He's been speaking it into existence since his fight with Rafael Fiziev, building this patriotic narrative that writes he's the only male American UFC champion right now, and wants to walk out of the Oval Office carrying the American flag to fight for the undisputed title on the South Lawn the night America celebrates its You couldn't script better narrative for a main event if you had Hollywood writers working on it for years. When Topuria posted "the champ is back" on Instagram, Gaethje immediately responded, "He better be. I'm supposed to fight him in June on the White House card. That's why I fought for this interim title." Read that again. Gaethje is stating point blank that his entire reason for beating Paddy Pimblett for the interim belt was specifically to force this unification fight into existence. He didn't do it for the belt itself, paycheck or rankings boost. He did it because it was the fastest, cleanest path to getting Topuria in the cage at the White House. That's strategic planning you don't usually see from someone known for walking forward and throwing bombs. People who actually know what's happening behind the scenes echo what the fighters are saying. Reporter Alvaro Colmenero put the probability of Topuria versus Gaethje headlining the White House card at 90%, about as close to a done deal as you get before official announcement. The timelines match perfectly on both sides. Topuria is aiming for an April to June return window, landing directly on the June 14th date, and Gaethje has been crystal clear he's not interested in fighting anyone else between now and then. He's waiting for this fight and only this fight. On paper, the matchup itself is an absolute dream for sport lovers. Topuria's pinpoint accuracy, perfect counter timing, and terrifying knockout power against Gaethje's relentless forward pressure, legendary iron chin, devastating leg kicks that have literally broken down opponents round by round, and his reputation as one of the most violent fighters ever to step in the octagon. It's precision versus chaos, timing versus pressure, guaranteed to produce fireworks regardless of how it plays out. Early betting odds from major sports books tell the story. Topuria opened as a massive -600 favorite, with Gaethje at +400, as significant underdog. That's a wide gap driven by technical advantages most analysts see Topuria hold. The MMA math is straightforward. Topuria dominated Max Holloway. Holloway previously beat Gaethje, so transitive logic points strongly in one direction. Daniel Cormier went on air, warning Gaethje he'd get badly beaten if he abandoned discipline, and tried brawling recklessly against a counter-striker as sharp as Topuria. Michael Chandler, who knows the lightweight division as well as anybody, called it a tall task for Gaethje, given how complete and well-rounded Topuria's game is across every fight phase. But here's what people need to remember beyond the odds, breakdowns, and MMA math. None of that diminishes what this fight actually means on a stage like this. We're discussing two real champions with real belts, fighting to unify the lightweight title at the White House on the South Lawn. Streaming to millions worldwide on Paramount+, with the President of the United States watching live from probably the most exclusive front row seat in combat sports history. On one side, Topuria, the undefeated prodigy, returning after nearly a year away to prove he's still the baddest lightweight on the planet. On the other, Gaethje, the veteran warrior who's been in the sport over a decade and has never held undisputed gold, fighting for the one thing that's eluded his entire career. The setting is historic, stakes are maximum, and storylines write themselves. Officially, no fights have been announced for the White House card yet. Dana White hasn't publicly confirmed anything, but when you add up everything we know, Topuria's settlement is complete, and he's training. Gaethje is demanding this fight on every platform. Insiders are putting it at 9, and White himself said he's building the baddest card of all time. It all points in one direction: the champ is back, the interim champ is ready, and the White House is waiting.